They say you should never judge a book by its cover, but on Flight 902 to Zurich, Senior Purser Felicity Banks didn't just judge, she sentenced. When she looked at Donovan, she didn't see the man who had just closed a 9-figure deal. She saw a problem that didn't belong in her pristine first-class cabin. She refused him water, mocked his appearance, and threatened to have him arrested. She thought she held all the cards at 30,000 feet, but she didn't know that the text message Donovan was typing wasn't to a friend. It was to the man who signed her paychecks. And when that phone rings, the turbulence is going to be the least of her worries. The Boeing 777-300ER sat on the tarmac at JFK International Airport, a gleaming beast of engineering destined for a 7-hour journey across the Atlantic to Zurich. Inside the terminal, the air was thick, with the scent of expensive coffee and the anxious energy of travelers. But for Donovan, standing near the gate for Royal Horizon Airlines, the only feeling was exhaustion. He adjusted the strap of his worn canvas messenger bag. He had been awake for nearly 36 hours, finalizing the acquisition of a Swiss biotech firm that would revolutionize clean water access in sub-Saharan Africa. The deal had been grueling. Lawyers, regulators, endless paperwork. He hadn't had time to shave, and he certainly hadn't had time to change out of his lucky, albeit slightly frayed, charcoal hoodie and loose-fitting joggers. He looked less like a venture capitalist with a portfolio worth billions and more like a graduate student who had just pulled an all-nighter for finals. Zone 1 boarding, the gate agent announced, her voice smooth and practiced. First class and diamond status passengers only, please. Donovan moved forward. He just wanted to sleep. He had booked Seat 1A, the window suite, specifically for the privacy and the lie-flat bed. As he approached the jet bridge entrance, a man in a bespoke Navy suit pushed past him, his roller bag clipping Donovan's shin. "Watch it," the man muttered, not even looking back. He flashed a platinum card at the attendant and breezed through. Donovan rubbed his shin, sighed, and stepped up to the scanner. He held out his phone with the digital boarding pass. The gate agent looked at the screen, then up at Donovan, then back at the screen. Her eyebrows knit together. "Sir, this is the first-class lane. Zone 4 will be called in 20 minutes. "I know," Donovan said, his voice raspy from lack of use. "I'm in 1A. She paused, typing something into her terminal, perhaps expecting an error message. When the machine beeped green, a flicker of surprise crossed her face. She handed him his passport back with a tight, confused smile. "Enjoy your flight, Mr. Grant." Donovan walked down the jet bridge, the cool air of the tunnel hitting his face. He loved aviation. He owned a Gulfstream G650ER for domestic hops, but for transatlantic flights, he preferred the anonymity of commercial first class. It kept him grounded, or so he told himself. He stepped onto the plane and turned left toward the sanctuary of the first-class cabin. It was a haven of cream-colored leather, walnut trim, and soft ambient lighting. There were only 8 suites, ensuring maximum exclusivity. Standing at the entrance of the aisle was Felicity. Her name tag identified her as the senior purser, but her posture screamed gatekeeper. She was immaculate, uniform pressed to a razor's edge, hair pulled back in a bun so tight it looked painful, and lipstick a shade of red that looked like a warning sign. She was greeting the man in the navy suit, taking his jacket with a sycophantic smile. "Let me hang that for you, Mr. Archibald. Champagne before takeoff?" "Scotch." "Neat. Then make it the blue label." The man, Archibald, barked as he settled into 1F. "Right away, sir." Felicity turned, her smile still plastered on, ready to greet the next guest. Then she saw Donovan. The smile didn't just fade, it evaporated. She looked him up and down, her eyes lingering on the canvas bag and the sneakers. She took a half-step sideways, effectively blocking the aisle. "Boarding pass," she said. It wasn't a question, it was a demand. Donovan blinked, taken aback by the sudden shift in temperature. "I already scanned it at the gate." "I need to see it," she insisted, extending a hand with manicured nails. "Economy is to the right, sir. You're holding up the line." "I'm not in economy," Donovan said quietly, pulling his phone back out. He brought up the QR code and held it out. Felicity snatched the phone from his hand, her eyes scanning the screen as if looking for a forgery. She stared at 1A and First Class for a long, uncomfortable silence. System error, probably, she muttered under her breath, loud enough for him to hear. She shoved the phone back at him. Seat's there. Try not to block the aisle with that bag. Donovan took a deep breath. Karma is a patient teacher, he reminded himself. He stepped past her, maneuvering his bag carefully so it wouldn't touch the pristine leather, and collapsed into seat 1A. He closed his eyes, waiting for the hiss of the cabin pressure and the hum of the engines. He just wanted water. Maybe a blanket. 5 minutes passed. He heard the clink of glass. He opened one eye. Felicity was pouring a golden amber liquid into a crystal tumbler for Mr. Archibald across the aisle. She placed a small bowl of warm nuts beside it. Here you are, Mr. Archibald. Is there anything else I can get you to make you comfortable? A newspaper. The Financial Times, Archibald grunted. I'll fetch it immediately. She spun around, her skirt swishing. As she passed Donovan's suite, he raised a hand. Excuse me? Could I get some water, please? She didn't stop. She didn't even look at him. She walked straight past his suite toward the galley, the curtain swishing shut behind her. Donovan sat there, his hands still half raised. Across the aisle, Archibald chuckled. A dry, rattling sound. He rattled his newspaper, glancing over the top of it at Donovan. Service isn't what it used to be, eh? Archibald said, his tone dripping with mockery rather than solidarity. Or maybe they just know who tips and who doesn't. Donovan didn't respond. He looked out the window at the rain beginning to streak the glass. It was going to be a long 7 hours. The plane had reached a cruising altitude of 38,000 feet. The fastened seatbelt sign chimed off, and the cabin bustled with the soft sounds of luxury service. The smell of warmed rosemary and garlic bread wafted through the air, signaling the start of the dinner service. Donovan's throat was parched. He hadn't had anything to drink since the coffee in the terminal 3 hours ago. During the taxi and takeoff, Felicity had checked on every single passenger in the cabin except him. She had adjusted the blinds for the elderly woman in 2A, hung up the coat of the tech CEO in 2F, and practically fawned over Archibald in 1F. Whenever she passed Donovan's seat, her gaze became fixed on a point in the middle distance, rendering him effectively invisible. He pressed the call button. A soft bing echoed in the cabin. He waited. 3 minutes. 5 minutes. He saw Felicity walk out of the galley with a bottle of Dom Perignon. She topped off Archibald's glass. Excellent year, Archibald noted, swirling the glass. Only the best for our premium guests. Felicity cooed. Excuse me, Donovan said, louder this time. Felicity stiffened. She finished pouring the champagne, placed the bottle in the ice bucket, and then, with the speed of a sloth, turned her head toward Donovan. Yes. The word was clipped, devoid of the warmth she showered on Archibald. I've been waiting for water for an hour, Donovan said, keeping his voice level. And I'd like to see the menu for dinner, she sighed, a short, sharp exhale through her nose. We are currently conducting the primary beverage service, sir. I will get to you when the other passengers have been attended to. You've served him 3 times, Donovan pointed out, gesturing to Archibald. Mr. Archibald is a Diamond Key member, Felicity stated, as if that explained everything. He has priority. I paid full fare for this seat, Donovan said. I'm not asking for priority. I'm asking for water. She stared at him for a beat, her eyes cold. Fine. She disappeared into the galley. A moment later, she returned. She did not have a crystal tumbler. She did not have a bottle of mineral water. She placed a small, flimsy plastic cup on his tray table, the kind usually used for mouthwash in the lavatory. It was filled halfway with tap water. He could smell the chlorine. There, she said. Now, please lower your voice. You are disturbing the ambiance for the other guests. She turned on her heel and walked away. Donovan looked at the plastic cup. It was a petty, calculated insult. He looked across the aisle. Archibald was smirking, cutting into a tenderloin steak that had just been placed before him. "She's got a point, kid," Archibald said, chewing loudly. "First class is about atmosphere. Usually people dress the part." Donovan ignored him. His stomach rumbled. He hadn't eaten. He waited for Felicity to return with the food cart. When she finally reached his row, the cart was noticeably lighter. She served the woman behind him a lobster thermidor. She served the man across from her a truffle risotto. She stopped at Donovan's seat. "Chicken or pasta?" she asked, looking at the ceiling. "I'd like the tenderloin, please," Donovan said. "I pre-ordered it on the app." "We're out," she said instantly. "I see Mr. Archibald eating it," Donovan said. "And I selected it 48 hours ago." "Catering mix-up," she said dismissively. "We have the pasta left. Or nothing." "Is it the pasta from the first-class menu?" Donovan asked. "It's a meal," she said vaguely. Donovan realized what was happening. She was going to give him a crew meal, or perhaps something left over from economy. He felt a heat rising in his chest. Not anger, but a profound disappointment. He wasn't just being treated poorly, he was being erased. "I'll pass on the food," Donovan said. "Just bring me the Wi-Fi voucher code. It usually comes with the seat." "The system is down," she lied. "I see Mr. Archibald using his iPad," Donovan noted. "He has a personal hotspot," she retorted, a technological impossibility at 30,000 feet that made Donovan almost laugh. "Look, do you want the pasta or not? I have work to do." "I would like to speak to the captain," Donovan said. The shift in his tone was subtle, but the air in the suite changed. It wasn't a request anymore. Felicity laughed. It was a harsh, incredulous sound. "You want to bother Captain Anderson because you didn't get your steak? Sit down, sir. If you continue to be disruptive, I will have to issue a formal warning. And you do not want a federal record. I'm not being disruptive." "I'm being discriminated against," Donovan said, "and I want to speak to the pilot in command." "Sit down." She leaned in, her voice dropping to a hiss. "People like you always think you can complain your way into an upgrade. You're lucky you're even up here. Don't push your luck." She stormed off to the galley, yanking the curtain shut with enough force to rattle the rings. Donovan sat in silence. The plastic cup of tap water sat untouched. He reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. He didn't need the airline's Wi-Fi voucher. His phone was a prototype satellite-linked device, capable of connecting directly to the Starlink grid regardless of airline restrictions. He unlocked the screen. He didn't open Twitter. He didn't open Instagram. He opened his contacts. He scrolled past Mom and Office. He scrolled to the letter P. Preston Vance, owner and CEO of Royal Horizon Airlines. Donovan typed a message. "Preston, Flight 902 to Zurich, Seat 1A. Your staff seems to think I'm a stowaway. Service is unique. Are you in London or New York?" He hit send. Across the aisle, Archibald wiped his mouth with a linen napkin. "You know," he called out, "they can ban you for using a phone during flight if they want." "Stewardess." Donovan didn't look up. He watched the 3 dots on his screen bounce. The cabin lights had been dimmed to a soft violet hue, designed to help the wealthy clientele drift off into a champagne-fueled slumber. But inside Suite 1A, Donovan was wide awake. The silence he had hoped for was pierced by the rhythmic, deliberate clinking of silverware from across the aisle. Mr. Archibald was enjoying a dessert of chocolate fondant, served with a side of fresh raspberries and a glass of port. Donovan's stomach gave a painful, hollow growl. He ignored it, focusing instead on the screen of his phone. The message to Preston Vance had been marked as delivered, but there was no read receipt yet. Preston was a busy man. He could be in a board meeting in Tokyo or sleeping in a penthouse in Dubai. Donovan knew he had to be patient, but patience was becoming a scarce resource. Suddenly, the curtain to the galley whipped open. Felicity marched out. She wasn't carrying a tray or a bottle. She was carrying a small, stiff piece of red cardstock. She stopped at Donovan's suite. She didn't lean in this time. She stood tall, projecting her authority so that the surrounding passengers, specifically Archibald, could witness the spectacle. "Mr. Grant," she said, her voice icy and loud enough to cut through the hum of the engines, "I have spoken to the other flight attendants. We have determined that your behavior is becoming a threat to the safety and order of this flight." Donovan stared at her, genuinely baffled. "My behavior? I've been sitting here in silence for 2 hours. I haven't received water. I haven't received food." "You have been belligerent," she interrupted, reciting a script she likely used on drunk tourists in economy. "You have attempted to intimidate the crew. You have made unauthorized demands to see the flight deck. And now I have received reports that you are using a device that is not in airplane mode, potentially interfering with the aircraft's navigation systems." "This phone is in flight mode," Donovan said calmly, holding it up. "It's using a satellite frequency that—" "I don't care about your technical jargon," Felicity snapped. She slapped the red card onto his tray table. It slid across the surface and hit the plastic cup of warm tap water. "Notice of violation. Interference with flight crew. This is a formal written warning," Felicity declared, a smug satisfaction curling the corner of her lip. "This is step 1. If you continue to argue, ask for special treatment, or use unauthorized devices. Step 2 is restraints. We have zip ties in the cockpit, and I will not hesitate to have the first officer come back here and use them. When we land in Zurich, airport police will be waiting to escort you off the plane before anyone else disembarks. Do you understand?" The cabin was dead silent. Even the white noise of the engines seemed to hold its breath. Archibald had stopped eating his fondant. He was watching with glee, his eyes crinkled in amusement. "Rough luck, pal," Archibald chuckled, wiping chocolate from his lip. "Best just do what the lady says. You don't want to spend a night in a Swiss jail. The fondue isn't as good as you'd think." Donovan looked from the red card to Felicity's face. She was trembling slightly, not from fear, but from the adrenaline of power. She was enjoying this. She had taken a man she judged to be worthless, a hoodie-wearing nobody, and put him in his place. "Felicity," Donovan said, his voice dropping an octave, becoming dangerously calm. "You are making a mistake, a career-ending mistake. I am asking you, one last time, to check the passenger manifest on your tablet. Check the notes, under my name. Just look." "I don't need to look at anything," she hissed. "I know exactly who you are. You're a non-rev, probably flying on a buddy pass from a friend who works in baggage handling, thinking you can scam a first-class experience. Well, the scam is over. Put the phone away, now." Donovan didn't move. He looked her dead in the eye. "I'm keeping the phone." Felicity's face went crimson. She reached for the overhead comms button, likely to call the cockpit. "That's it. I'm calling Captain Anderson." "Go ahead," Donovan said. "Tell him Donovan Grant is in 1A. I'll tell him a disruptive passenger is refusing a direct order." She spat. She turned and stomped back toward the galley, grabbing the interphone handset on the wall. She didn't try to lower her voice. Everyone in the first 2 rows could hear her. "Captain, this is Felicity in the forward cabin. Yes. The problem passenger in 1A. He's refusing to comply with the Section 21 warning. He's hostile. Yes, sir. I think we need a security presence at the gate. No, I don't think we need to divert, but yes, I understand. I'll keep an eye on him. Thank you, Captain." She hung up and turned back to the cabin, smoothing her skirt. She shot Donovan a look of triumph. "The captain has been notified. The authorities in Zurich have been alerted. You're done." Donovan leaned back in his seat. He felt a vibration in his hand. He looked down at his phone. New message from Preston Vance. "Are you kidding me? I'm currently at the hangar. Is in Zurich waiting for my own jet. I just pulled up your flight data. Who is the purser?" "Banks," Donovan typed back, his thumb flying across the screen. "Felicity Banks. She just issued me a formal written warning. Threatened me with zip ties. Also, Archibald in 1F is enjoying the show a little too much. She thinks I'm a non-rev on a buddy pass." A moment later, 3 dots appeared. Then a message. "Non-rev? You own 15% of the airline, Donovan. I'm calling the cockpit via SATCOM. Watch this. Donovan let out a long, slow breath. He picked up the red warning card, folded it neatly in half, and placed it in his pocket. You might want to keep that as a souvenir, Archibald called out. Frame it. The day I tried to fly with the big boys. Donovan turned his head slowly to look at Archibald. Enjoy your dessert, Mr. Archibald. It's the last sweet thing you're going to taste for a while. Archibald scoffed, dismissing him with a wave of his hand. Delusional. Donovan closed his eyes. The trap was set. Now, all he had to do was wait for the hammer to drop. In the cockpit of Flight 902, Captain Richard Anderson was sipping lukewarm coffee and monitoring the fuel flow indicators. It was a routine flight. The weather over the Atlantic was stable, and the headwinds were lighter than expected. He was looking forward to the layover in Zurich. He had a favorite watch shop he wanted to visit. Pursers worked up. The first officer, a young man named Evans, noted, "Guy in 1A must be a real piece of work." "Banks is a good purser, but she gets high-strung," Anderson replied, adjusting his headset. "If she says he's a threat, we trust her. I'll radio ahead to Swiss ground control in about 30 minutes to arrange the police escort." Suddenly, a sharp, urgent tone cut through the cockpit silence. It wasn't the standard air traffic control radio. It was the selective calling system, SELCAL, but the specific chime indicated a high-priority satellite link from the company's executive channel. Anderson frowned. "Company calling? At this hour?" Usually, they just send an ACARS text. He toggled the switch. "Flight 902, Captain Anderson speaking." "Go ahead." The voice on the other end wasn't a dispatcher. It wasn't a flight operations manager. The voice was deep, familiar, and vibrating with suppressed rage. "Captain Anderson, this is Preston Vance." Anderson nearly dropped his coffee cup. He sat up straighter, his heart hammering against his ribs. Preston Vance wasn't just the CEO. He was the owner, the man who had built Royal Horizon from a regional carrier into a global luxury brand. He never called cockpits personally unless the plane was on fire. Mr. Vance," Anderson stammered. "Sir, what a surprise. Is everything all right with the aircraft?" "The aircraft is fine, Captain. The problem is the personnel." Vance's voice crackled in the headset, crystal clear. "I just received a text from a very close friend of mine, a business partner who, incidentally, personally financed the new fleet of Dreamliners you're so fond of flying. He tells me he is currently being threatened with arrest on your flight." Anderson felt the blood drain from his face. He looked at Evans, who was watching him with wide eyes. "Sir, I'm not sure I understand," Anderson said, his mind racing. "We have a disruptive passenger in first class, yes. Seat 1A. The purser informed me he was non-compliant and—" "Captain." Vance cut him off, his voice dropping to a deadly whisper. "The man in Seat 1A is Donovan Grant. Do you know who Donovan Grant is?" "The name sounds familiar, sir. He's the founder of Aurora Capital. He owns a significant stake in this airline. And more importantly, he's the man I was planning to have dinner with tonight in Zurich. Instead, I hear my senior purser has refused him food, denied him water, and threatened to zip-tie him. Is that correct?" Anderson swallowed hard. His mouth felt like it was filled with sand. "Sir, Purser Banks reported that—" "I don't care what Banks reported," Vance roared, the sound distorting slightly in the headset. "She judged a book by its cover, and she dragged you into it. Now, you are going to fix this. Immediately." "Yes, sir. Of course, sir. What are your orders?" "You are to leave the cockpit. You are to go to Seat 1A. You are to apologize to Mr. Grant personally. And then, you are to hand the phone to Felicity Banks so I can have a word with her. Do not tell her who is on the line. Just give her the phone." "Understood, sir." "And Anderson? If Mr. Grant walks off that plane anything less than completely satisfied, you'll be flying cargo Cessnas in Alaska by Monday. Am I clear?" "Crystal clear, sir." The line clicked dead. Anderson sat frozen for a moment. He looked at Evans. "You have the controls." "Captain?" Evans asked nervously. "I have to go back there," Anderson said, unbuckling his harness with shaking hands. "We made a mistake. A massive mistake." He grabbed his hat, put it on, and adjusted his tie. He took a deep breath, opened the reinforced cockpit door, and stepped into the galley. Felicity was there, leaning against the counter, gossiping with a junior flight attendant. When she saw the captain, she straightened up, a look of validation washing over her face. "Captain," she said, nodding towards the aisle. "Thank you for coming back. He's still in 1A. Do you want the restraints? I have them ready." Anderson looked at her. For the first time, he saw the arrogance in her eyes, the sheer lack of hospitality, masked as protocol. He didn't say a word. He walked past her, brushing the curtain aside, and stepped into the first-class cabin. The cabin was quiet. Archibald looked up, excited. He nudged his wine glass, watching the captain approach. "Here we go," he whispered to himself. "Show time." Anderson walked straight to seat 1A. Donovan was looking out the window, his hoodie pulled up slightly. He looked tired. Anderson stopped at the edge of the suite. He took off his hat. "Mr. Grant?" Anderson said. His voice was humble, stripped of all command authority. Donovan turned. He looked at the captain, then at Felicity, who was hovering behind Anderson, waiting for the handcuffs to come out. "Yes, Captain," Donovan asked. Anderson bowed his head slightly. "Mr. Grant, I have just spoken with Mr. Vance." The name landed like a grenade in the small cabin. Behind the captain, Felicity's eyes widened. Her hand flew to her mouth. "He informed me of the situation," Anderson continued, his voice trembling slightly. "On behalf of the flight deck and Royal Horizon Airlines, I want to offer my deepest, most sincere apologies. There has been a catastrophic misunderstanding regarding your status and who you are." Archibald in seat 1F dropped his fork. It clattered loudly against the china. Donovan looked at the captain, his expression unreadable. "It wasn't a misunderstanding, Captain. It was profiling. Pure and simple. I understand, sir, and we will address it fully." Anderson reached into his pocket and pulled out a satellite phone handset, the one connected to the cockpit secure line. He turned to Felicity. Felicity was frozen. Her face had gone from a smug flush to a ghostly, sickly white. She looked at the captain, then at Donovan, then at the phone. "Miss Banks," the captain said, his voice hard. "There is a call for you." "F for me?" she stammered. "Who is it?" "It's the owner," Anderson said. "Mr. Vance. He wants to hear your side of the story." He held the phone out to her. Felicity's hands were shaking so badly she could barely grip the device. She looked at Donovan, her eyes pleading, searching for some kind of mercy. She found none. Donovan just picked up his plastic cup of water, took a sip, and watched. She lifted the phone to her ear. Hello?" she whispered. The cabin was silent enough that Donovan could hear the muffled sound of Preston Vance's voice on the other end. It wasn't a shout. It was a cold, precise dismantling. "Miss Banks." Preston's voice cut through the speaker. "This is Preston Vance. I'm currently looking at your employment file. I see you've been with us for 6 years. I want you to take a very good look around that first-class cabin. Take a mental picture. Because as of the moment this plane touches down in Zurich, you will never set foot on one of my aircraft again." Felicity made a small, choking sound. "Mr. Vance, I didn't know. He didn't look like what?" Vance's voice rose, audible even to Archibald across the aisle. "He didn't look like he deserved basic human dignity. You embarrassed him. You embarrassed me. And you embarrassed this airline. You are relieved of duty, effective immediately. Hand your badge to Captain Anderson. You will sit in the jump seat in the rear galley for the remainder of the flight. Do not speak to any passengers. Do not serve any passengers. Get out of my sight." The line went dead. Felicity lowered the phone slowly. Tears were streaming down her face, cutting tracks through her heavy makeup. She looked at Donovan. "Mr. Grant, Don't," Donovan said softly. "Just go." Captain Anderson took the phone from her limp hand. You heard Mr. Vance, Felicity. Badge. Now. With trembling fingers, she unpinned her gold senior purser wings and handed them to the captain. Then, like a ghost, she turned and walked back through the cabin, past the confused passengers, past the curtain, all the way to the back of the plane. Captain Anderson turned back to Donovan. Mr. Grant, please, allow me to move you to 1F, or perhaps we can prepare a fresh meal. Anything you need. Donovan looked at Archibald in 1F. The arrogant man in the Navy suit was staring at his plate, refusing to make eye contact, shrinking into his seat as if trying to disappear. No, Captain, Donovan said. I'm fine right here, but I think Mr. Archibald in 1F might need a refill. He looks a little parched. Donovan smiled. It was the first time he had smiled the entire flight. But, Captain, Donovan added, one thing. I'd like the real menu now, and maybe a glass of that Blue Label. The atmosphere in the first-class cabin had shifted so drastically that the air felt pressurized, heavier than the cabin altitude. Felicity Banks was gone, exiled to the jump seat in the rear galley, likely sitting between the lavatories and the trash compactors, contemplating the ruin of her career. In her place, a junior flight attendant named Jenny appeared. She was young, with wide, terrified eyes, clearly having been briefed by a shaken Captain Anderson that the man in 1A was effectively the boss of her boss's boss. Jenny approached Donovan's suite as if she were approaching a sleeping tiger. "Mr. Grant?" she whispered, her hands clasped tightly in front of her. "Captain Anderson asked me to take over service for the cabin. I have brought the warm nuts and the vintage port, and I have the tenderloin heating up right now. It will be just 5 minutes." Donovan looked up from his phone. He offered her a tired, genuine smile. "Thank you, Jenny. None of this is your fault. Please relax. I'm just a passenger." "Yes, sir. Thank you, sir." She exhaled, placing the crystal ramekin of macadamia nuts down with the precision of a bomb disposal expert. As she moved away, the silence across the aisle was broken. "So," a voice croaked. Donovan turned his head slowly. Mr. Archibald was leaning forward in his seat. The arrogance that had coated him like cheap cologne earlier was gone, replaced by a sweaty, desperate attempt at camaraderie. He held up his Scotch glass in a shaky toast. "Quite the turn of events, eh?" Archibald laughed nervously. "Who knew? I mean, really, who knew? You travel incognito. Very smart. Very Elon Musk of you." Donovan didn't raise his glass. He just watched him. "It's not incognito, Mr. Archibald. It's just clothes. I dress for comfort, not to impress strangers in metal tubes." Right. Comfort is king," Archibald agreed a little too quickly. He took a large gulp of scotch. "So, Aurora Capital? I've heard of it. Big player in the tech space, right? Or is it medical?" "We diversify," Donovan said dryly. "Infrastructure, logistics, biotech." Archibald perked up at the word logistics. He saw an opening, a way to salvage the situation and perhaps turn this awkward flight into a business opportunity. He adjusted his tie, trying to reclaim some of his lost dignity. "Logistics, you say? Well, that's a coincidence. I'm the Senior VP of Operations for Apex Global Freight. We handle supply chains for half the Fortune 500. Archibald pulled a business card from his pocket, his movements regaining some of their oily smoothness. "We're actually looking for equity partners for a massive expansion into Eastern Europe. Since we're neighbors for the next 4 hours, maybe we could talk shop. I could show you some projections." He leaned across the aisle, extending the card. Donovan looked at the card. Apex Global Freight. The name triggered a memory in his database of recent due diligence reports. "Apex," Donovan repeated, not taking the card. "You're the company currently bidding on the shipping contract for the new Clean Water Initiative in Zurich. The project I just acquired." Archibald froze. His smile twitched. Yes, we are. It's a massive contract. We're the front runners. We have the best rates in the industry." "You did have the best rates," Donovan corrected. "But my analysts flagged a concern about Apex last week. Something about labor violations in your Southeast Asian hubs. And a history of cutting corners on safety maintenance to pad executive bonuses. Archibald paled. That's just rumors. Competitor sabotage. We run a tight ship. Do you? Donovan gestured to the empty space where Felicity had stood. Because usually, company culture starts at the top and trickles down. You sat there for 3 hours and watched a crew member abuse a paying customer. You laughed. You encouraged it. You told me to. Know my place. That tells me everything I need to know about how you manage your people and your partners. Now, wait a minute, Archibald stammered, sweat beading on his forehead. This is a flight. It's not a boardroom. I was just having a bit of fun, letting off steam. And I, Donovan said, his voice cold and final, am the chairman of the board that is voting on that contract tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. Archibald dropped the business card. It fluttered to the floor, landing face down on the carpet. Mr. Grant, please, you can't base a $100 million decision on a misunderstanding over airline seats. I base my decisions on character, Mr. Archibald, Donovan said, turning back to his window, and I've seen yours. For the remaining 3 hours of the flight, the first-class cabin was silent. Jenny brought Donovan his tenderloin, cooked to perfection. She kept his glass full of Blue Label. She offered him warm cookies and fresh coffee. Across the aisle, Archibald didn't eat. He didn't drink. He just stared at the back of the seat in front of him, his face a mask of mounting horror, realizing that the most expensive flight of his life was about to cost him a lot more than the ticket price. The descent into Zurich was smooth, the Swiss Alps rising like jagged teeth through the mist below. As the wheels touched down with a gentle thud, the reverse thrusters roared, slowing the massive bird to a taxi speed. Usually, the moment the seatbelt sign turned off, the first-class cabin would erupt into a flurry of movement, people grabbing bags, checking phones, rushing to be the first off. But today, Captain Anderson's voice came over the intercom, tight and serious. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Zurich. We ask that all passengers remain seated with their seatbelts fastened. We have a security protocol to attend to before disembarkation can commence. Please remain in your seats. A murmur of confusion rippled through the plane. Archibald looked out the window. What now? He muttered. Through the rain-streaked glass he could see the jet bridge connecting, but down on the tarmac, a convoy of black SUVs had pulled up right next to the plane. Several figures in high-visibility vests and 2 uniformed Swiss federal police officers were standing at the bottom of the stairs. The cabin door opened, but passengers didn't start leaving. Instead, a man walked onto the plane. He was tall, wearing a charcoal wool coat over a sharp suit, his silver hair swept back. He radiated the kind of power that made the air conditioning feel colder. It was Preston Vance. He didn't stop at the galley. He walked straight into the first-class cabin. Captain Anderson emerged from the cockpit, looking pale. Mr. Vance, sir. Preston ignored him. His eyes locked onto Donovan in seat 1A. Preston's stern face broke into a warm, apologetic smile. He extended a hand. Donovan, Preston said, his voice booming in the quiet cabin. I am mortified. Truly. Donovan stood up, stretching his legs. He shook Preston's hand. It's been a long day, Preston, but your new engines are quiet. I'll give you that. I wanted to handle this personally, Preston said. He turned to the captain. Where is she? In the rear galley, sir, awaiting instructions. Bring her forward. Now. While the captain scurried off, Preston turned his gaze to the rest of the cabin. His eyes landed on Archibald in 1F. Archibald shrank back, trying to look invisible. You must be the Diamond Key member, Preston said, his voice dripping with disdain. Mr. Archibald, I see you've been enjoying our hospitality. Archibald couldn't form a sentence. Your status has been revoked, effective immediately, Preston stated calmly. You'll be receiving a refund for your return ticket. You can find your own way home. We don't transport people who find sport in the humiliation of others. Before Archibald could protest, the captain returned, leading a weeping Felicity Banks. She was no longer wearing her blazer or her scarf. She looked small, defeated, and terrified. "Mr. Vance," she sobbed. "Please, I have a mortgage. I have." "You had a job," Preston interrupted, his voice like steel. "A job that required you to be the face of this brand. Instead, you acted like a bouncer at a cheap club. You profiled a man because of his clothes. You abused your authority." Preston stepped closer to her. "The police are waiting at the jet bridge. Not to arrest you. You're not worth the paperwork. But they are there to escort you out of the secure area immediately. Your security clearance is pulled. You are trespassing." He pointed to the open door. "Get off my plane." Felicity looked around the cabin, searching for sympathy. She found none. She hung her head and walked out, her heels clicking on the floor, passing the waiting police officers who flanked her and marched her up the bridge like a criminal. Preston turned back to Donovan. "My car is waiting on the tarmac. We can skip customs. I've arranged a diplomatic clearance for you. Dinner is on me. And I believe we have a bottle of 1942 waiting." Donovan grabbed his canvas messenger bag. He looked at Archibald one last time. "Good luck with the contract bid, Mr. Archibald," Donovan said. Donovan and Preston walked off the plane together, leaving the rest of the passengers stunned silence. As they stepped onto the jet bridge, Archibald scrambled to grab his phone. He dialed his CEO. "Sir, it's Archibald. We might have a problem with the Zurich deal." The morning after, Zurich, 8:55 a.m. The conference room of the Helvetica Water Consortium was a masterpiece of Swiss minimalism, glass walls, slate floors, and a view of the lake that cost more than most people earned in a lifetime. Mr. Archibald sat at the head of the long mahogany table. He was sweating through his second shirt of the morning. The hangover from the flight, compounded by a sleepless night of panic, throbbed behind his eyes. He had tried to call his contacts at Apex Global Freight to warn them, but he couldn't find the words. He had decided to gamble. He told himself that Donovan Grant was just an investor, a money man. He wouldn't actually sabotage a deal over a seat dispute. Business was business. Right. The heavy glass doors slid open. Donovan walked in. He wasn't wearing a hoodie today. He wore a bespoke Italian suit, charcoal gray, tailored to perfection. But it wasn't the suit that commanded attention. It was the silence that followed him. Flanking him were the 4 senior board members of the consortium. Archibald stood up, forcing a smile that looked like a grimace. "Mr. Grant! Gentlemen, I have the projections right here. If you look at slide 1, you'll see Apex offers a 15% efficiency increase regarding—" "Sit down, Mr. Archibald," Donovan said. His voice wasn't loud, but it stopped Archibald mid-sentence. Archibald sank into his chair. Donovan remained standing. He placed a single folder on the table. It wasn't the thick stack of logistical data Archibald had prepared. It was a thin, black folder. "We have reviewed your proposal," Donovan began, addressing the room but keeping his eyes on Archibald. "The numbers are impressive. On paper, Apex Global Freight is the logical choice." Archibald let out a breath he didn't know he was holding. He's going to go through with it, he thought. Thank God. "However," Donovan continued, "this project is not just about moving pipes and filtration systems. It is about bringing clean water to vulnerable communities. It requires empathy, integrity, and a respect for human dignity at every level of the supply chain." Donovan slid the black folder across the table toward the other board members. "Yesterday, I had the misfortune of sharing a 7-hour flight with your senior VP of operations. During that time, I witnessed Mr. Archibald actively encourage the harassment of a passenger he deemed inferior. I saw him laugh at the abuse of power. I heard him brag about his status while mocking someone he believed was poor." Archibald's face turned a sickly shade of gray. "Mr. Grant, please. That was a private moment. It has no bearing on my company's ability to. It has everything to do with it." Donovan snapped, slamming his hand on the table. The sound cracked like a whip. How you do one thing is how you do everything. If you treat a stranger with contempt because you think they have no power, how will you treat the villagers in the regions we are serving? How will you treat your workers when no one is watching? We are not looking for a vendor, Archibald. We are looking for a partner, and you are not fit to be one. Donovan turned to the board. I am exercising my veto power as majority stakeholder. Apex Global Freight is disqualified. The silence in the room was absolute. Archibald scrambled to gather his papers, his hands shaking so violently he dropped his tablet. This is personal. You can't do this. It became business the moment you handed me your card. Donovan said coldly, Security will escort you out. 2 days later, the fall of Apex. The termination wasn't done in a private office. It was done via a courier letter delivered to Archibald's hotel room, followed by a phone call from the Apex CEO that lasted exactly 45 seconds. You cost us $150 million because you wanted to play big man in first class, the CEO screamed, the distortion of the phone failing to mask his fury. You're done. And don't bother checking your stock options. The legal department is filing a suit against you for gross negligence and breach of fiduciary duty. We are freezing your severance. We are coming for everything, Archibald. By the time we're done, you won't even be able to afford a bus ticket, let alone first class. Archibald sat on the edge of the hotel bed, the phone slipping from his fingers. He was stranded in Zurich, his corporate credit card already declined at the front desk, his career incinerated by his own ego. 3 months later, Newark, New Jersey. The fluorescent lights of the Budget Go rental car office buzzed with an irritating, mosquito-like hum. The air smelled of wet floor mop and stale coffee. Behind the counter, wearing a polyester polo shirt that was 2 sizes too big and scratched at her neck, sat Felicity Banks. She looked 10 years older. The impeccable bun was gone, replaced by a messy ponytail. The red lipstick was gone. Her eyes, once filled with the arrogance of a gatekeeper, were now dull and exhausted. After Preston Vance had fired her on the tarmac, the aviation industry had closed its doors to her with terrifying speed. She was flagged in the global hiring database. Do not hire. Gross misconduct. Customer discrimination. She had lost her apartment in the city within 6 weeks. Now, she commuted 2 hours to stand behind this counter for minimum wage. Excuse me, a shrill voice yelled, snapping Felicity out of her daze. Standing on the other side of the counter was a woman in a heavy fur coat, tapping a platinum credit card on the laminate surface. I reserved a luxury sedan, the woman barked. This says you're giving me a Ford Focus. Do I look like I drive a Ford Focus? I'm sorry, ma'am, Felicity said, her voice trembling slightly. It was a script she knew too well that now the roles were reversed. We are sold out of the luxury class. The Ford is the only vehicle available. This is unacceptable, the woman screamed, leaning over the counter, her face inches from Felicity's. Do you know how much money I spend with this company? I am a Gold Circle member. I want your manager. I want you fired. You are incompetent and rude. Felicity felt the tears pricking her eyes. It was a mirror image. She was looking at herself from 3 months ago. The entitlement, the cruelty, the demand for special treatment. I can't do anything else, ma'am, Felicity whispered, bowing her head. Then get someone who can, the woman shouted. God, why do they hire people like you? You clearly don't belong in a customer-facing role. Felicity stood there, taking the abuse, swallowing the bitter pill of karma. She realized then that this wasn't just a bad job, it was her penance. Every day she would have to serve people exactly like her former self, and every day she would feel the sting of being treated like she was invisible. The Donovan Protocol. High above the Atlantic, cruising at 40,000 feet in the renovated first-class cabin of a Royal Horizon Dreamliner, Donovan Grant sat in seat 1A. He was reading a report on his tablet. But it wasn't a financial report. Preston Vance had kept his word. The incident hadn't just resulted in firings. It had triggered a cultural overhaul. The screen displayed the completion rates for the airline's new mandatory training, the Donovan Protocol, Unconscious Bias, and the Art of True Hospitality. The training module opened with a simple quote, Service is not about looking down on those you serve. It is about lifting them up. A flight attendant approached his suite. It wasn't Jenny, but a new hire. He noticed she paused before entering, checking the manifest, then looked at him with a warm, genuine smile. She didn't look at his clothes. He was wearing his favorite hoodie again. She looked him in the eye. "Mr. Grant," she said softly, "welcome back. Would you like a bottle of water before we take off?" "Yes, please," Donovan said. She returned not with a plastic cup, but with a crystal glass and a chilled bottle. She placed it down gently. "Is there anything else I can get you?" "No," Donovan said, picking up the glass. "This is perfect." He looked out the window at the clouds, stretching out like a white ocean. He thought of Archibald, likely buried in legal paperwork. He thought of Felicity, likely being yelled at by a stranger in New Jersey. He took a sip of the water. It was crisp, clean, and refreshing. Karma, Donovan realized, was a lot like gravity. It was invisible, it was constant, and if you walked off a ledge expecting to float just because you felt superior, it would always pull you down. But if you stayed grounded, it kept you exactly where you belonged. He closed his eyes and finally, peacefully, drifted off to sleep. And there you have it. The story of how a $100 hoodie and a $150 million attitude adjustment proved that character always outranks status. Archibald and Felicity learned the hard way that when you try to make someone else feel small, you're usually just showing the world how small you really are. I hope you enjoyed this story of hard karma. If this story satisfied your need for justice, please smash that like button. It helps the algorithm find more people who need to hear this message. Subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss our next story. And tell me in the comments, have you ever been judged by your appearance only to prove them wrong? I read every single comment. Thanks for watching, stay humble, and I'll see you in the next one.